You're listening to the Microsoft Innovation Podcast, where we explore the intersection of people, business, and technology. This year, we're adding a new show to our lineup, The AI Advantage, to help you learn the skills you need to thrive in the AI era.
Welcome to the MVP Show. My intention is that you listen to the stories of these MVP guests and are inspired to become an MVP and bring value to the world through your skills. If you have not checked it out already, I do a YouTube series called How to Become an MVP. The link is in the show notes. With that, let's get on with the show. Today's guest joins me from Stockholm, Sweden. She's the founder of Knowledge Management Expert at No Flow Value and was first awarded her Microsoft MVP in 2024. But that's after working for Microsoft for 15 odd years. She's known for driving significant business value through Microsoft 365. You can find links to her bio and socials in the show notes for this episode. Welcome to the show, Rebecka.
Hi, Mark. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I'm usually on the other side of the microphone.
So tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, it's called Knowledge Fika. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept of Swedish fika.
No, tell me.
It's similar to what Americans would refer to as water cooler conversations, right? Back in the day, it used to be in most offices, you had a 10 o'clock in the morning coffee break and you had a 3 o'clock in the afternoon coffee break when people would just stop working, go to the break room, sit down and have casual conversations, sometimes work related, most of the time not. But it was also, I know my colleagues, when I moved to America, when I moved to Redmond, they were kind of laughing at this and they said, so that's just you slacking off work, right? Getting paid to have coffee. And I'm like, well, you know what? It's actually more than that, because those casual conversations, you connect with people on a personal level. And that has some magic effects on working relationships. You make new connections, you meet new people. You realize that you have common challenges or common solutions in different departments. And, it becomes very creative and innovative. And also it's very good for morale and well-being. So me and an American woman who lives in Sweden since many years got connected on LinkedIn because she reached out to me and she said, oh my God, I'm so excited. There's another knowledge management person in this country. Wow, we should connect. So we had an informal coffee and then, the rest is history. We started doing this podcast and, similar to this one, like fireside chat, casual conversation, talking to interesting profiles from Microsoft partners, and, mostly centered around knowledge management, AI, or the combination of those.
So interesting, particularly I want to understand the fact that you've had such a long tenure in SharePoint, and I've seen some stuff around AI document automation that Microsoft's talked about in recent years. Then there's organizations that have a tremendous amount of data sitting in their SharePoint environments, and now along comes AI, and to make sense of it all, what are you seeing is kind of where are these technologies merging now? What are you kind of seeing day to day where AI and then knowledge management is starting to cross over?
Well, I think that AI needs knowledge management, not necessarily all the dry academic theoretical frameworks and, processes and things like that, but the foundational principles of knowledge management, because that's all about how we govern, how we manage life cycle. A lot of people, unfortunately, say the words knowledge management, but what they're actually talking about is content management or actually even document management, right? But knowledge management is more than that, because we have this whole body of what's called tacit knowledge, where, first of all, I think AI and the capabilities we have now in M365 with AI reasoning over so much more of the knowledge in our organization than just what's formalized in a document. It can really help some of the problems that knowledge managers have battled from, the very beginning, about 30 years ago, when knowledge management started evolving as an art and a science. But I also think that the reverse applies. AI can help knowledge managers and knowledge management solve problems, but AI, to be super efficient and for organizations to reap the benefits and get a faster ROI, knowledge management principles are needed. But it needs to be expanded, and we need to shift our focus, I think, in this space from enterprise content management to enterprise knowledge management. We need governance, we need lifecycle, we need RBACs, or role-based access controls, on the less tangible assets as well. Our chats, our videos, our audio, all of that, email, calendars even, right? We need to think governance and lifecycle in much broader terms.
But you're mentioning RBAC, and I've done presentations where I talk about SharePoint's lack of RBAC, and therefore being a risk vector inside an organization, particularly in an AI-driven world. How do you talk about RBAC from a SharePoint point of view?
Yeah, I guess I have to be careful now, because I don't want to lose my status as SharePoint MVP, right? But no, I'm just kidding. Security permissions in SharePoint is not easy for the most experienced of us, right? And there are people who are on the deeper technical level a lot more, a lot better and more experienced than I am on that, because I've always kept more at the business value, solving business problems, the functional. That's my niche. But so it is convoluted and it is complex. But if you don't have any kind of roles and responsibilities matrix in your organization, you can't really have the governance. You won't be able to control it. The sharing links is probably the biggest cause of that, because a lot of organizations do not think through who can create a site, who can share a site, who can share what document library, etc. So they grow organically, and all of a sudden you have this forest of sharing links right, left, and center, orphan sites, what we usually call site sprawl and things like that, which is also caused to some extent by the fact that organizations don't understand what happens in SharePoint on the back end every time you create a new team, and depending on what channel type you create additional sites, right? So but not to say that that's the fault of SharePoint or SharePoint design flaw. I think it's in human nature. We're very good at squirreling things away, but we're not very good at tidying up and throwing out. It's, I just moved into a new house a year ago. And for 6 months before we moved, I said to my husband, the 20 boxes you have in the attic that has stuff since you were 17 years old, please go through and clean them out. What happens in the end when you move houses? Well, the night before the movers come, you realize you haven't even gotten to those boxes yet. So you move them from one attic to the next. Organizations do the same with content. Cleaning up, organizing, it's not fun.
And after all, it is called SharePoint. It was intended for sharing information inside the organization. I'm keen, though, to get an explanation from you, because I've not got any experience in this area, is you talked about the difference between content management and knowledge management. How do you explain it?
The content management side is the explicit knowledge, the tangible assets where we've codified or written down in some way, shape, or form our knowledge, right? But it's all that the not the implicit, but the tacit stuff, the intangible assets, which comes from, in most cases, we usually refer to it as the knowledge that people carry around in their heads, which is actually experience, more so than traditional knowledge that we've absorbed through education or through reading books, etc. It's the know-how that we get from repeatedly doing something, learning from our mistakes, etc. And that's very hard to capture. Well, this is where sometimes I have a little bit of a debate, shall we say, a polite disagreement with some of the very leading, most prominent experts in the field of knowledge management, who argue that you can't codify tacit knowledge, because once you write these things down, they're no longer knowledge. They are now static assets that are subject to interpretation by the reader. They become information. And I agree with that. What I mean when I say codifying tacit knowledge is not to write it down, to transcribe it. But what I mean is that AI has the capability to draw from information, whether it's in an engaged community conversation, whether it's a team chat or a team channel, right? So we can pull the nuggets out of those conversations, best answers in Engage, for instance. And it will incorporate that as it generates new content for you. So that's a way of codifying the tacit without killing the knowledge bit, turning it into information.
So interesting. I used to work for a company that started with I and ended with M. And, they worked on some big,
You're talking about HAL now, right?
Yeah. Some big petroleum type customers, right? That, extract oil, petroleum and things like that. And one of the things that they found with AI coming about is that sometimes these systems had been built 50 years ago, but they'd been built by engineers who have a massive attention to detail and to writing notes and things. And so they're able to extract all these schematics and things of, let's say, a massive oil rig, feed that in when this oil rig was now having challenges. And those people will obviously no longer work for the company. They're retired, they're gone, etc. But with AI, I was able to bring down that jot on the blueprint to, note this, was able to bring that all to life. And it was tacit knowledge in that it was, you had to know it because you were there type thing. But because of those notes, now 50 years later, had a whole new lease of life and created a whole new level of value for the organization to be able to move forward and fix these things for the current engineers that never had that connection. But that was an organization, obviously, that was built around engineering and by nature codifying into drawings and things like that information. That's not most companies.
No, it's not, right? And especially not if you look at, organizations that predominantly consists of knowledge workers, right? Engineering, these types of things, because there's formulas, there's structure, there's, procedures. Things are very well defined. When you're in a knowledge worker organization, let's say a professional services, a consulting organization, right? Things are not that cookie cutter. So there's where you have a huge value from tacit knowledge. One of the predominant vehicles and actually one of the core pillars in knowledge management academia is communities of practice. So communities in Engage, basically, right? Engage was, and it's a pet peeve of mine when people say Engage, AKA Yammer, because Engage and Yammer are night and day, right? Engage is really built for being a platform for communities of practice, which we're now seeing, which would all the improvements that are made, all the new features around subject matter experts, SME approved answers, etc., and how Copilot will actually put more weight on an answer in Engage that has been given the check mark of SME approved or best answer, right? So that's been the only way to really scale tacit knowledge and exchange. And what it is it's conversations like these, right? When I worked at Microsoft Consulting Services in Redmond for Global HQ, I was part of the office of the CTO, and we ran the knowledge management, including content and collaboration platform built on SharePoint, of course, and the communities of practice. And we had around 105 different communities of practice. We had over 1,000 community leads and SMEs. And on average, we would have between 43 and 45,000 unique members engaged a month, right? Month over month in these communities. So they were an incredible way for, a consultant is working on client site. They might not even have access to their own laptop. They can't access any of the knowledge bases or resources in the Microsoft tenant. So, but what they could do was they could always throw out a question to the relevant community. And we measured all of this. We had a lot of data. We measured response times, number of responses, all of these things. And we saw that most of the time when somebody asked a community for help with a customer problem, they would get collateral, they would get, detailed recommendations and instructions of how to tackle a certain problem within minutes. So, that drove up customer satisfaction, but it also helped the consultant who was battling a certain problem that they hadn't encountered before. They learned. So now they could be a better, they could provide more value for the next engagement and so forth. But it's very hard to motivate to certain, in many organizations really have to show the return on investment in dollars and cents to leadership to get any kind of budget. And it's hard to measure that because it's indirect and there's the ripple effects over time, because even if 80% of the community members never participate and share or ask questions, they're reading these conversations. They're seeing the collateral that's being shared. So it's hard to quantify. But now we have Copilot, for instance, that can actually help pull out these nuggets and incorporate that in content that is then, created and widely distributed. So you can now all of a sudden scale this. It's still hard to measure, but you can really start scaling tacit knowledge sharing and tacit knowledge exchange.
I like that. I've learned a lot. Tell me, how did you become an MVP? Like, obviously been in Microsoft for a long time. Were you aware of the MVP program when you're in Microsoft, or were you more aware of it when you came out of Microsoft? And I know that you went in and out of Microsoft a few times, but how did becoming an MVP at this time come about for you?
Well, yeah, I left in October 18 because I wanted to go back to Sweden for personal reasons, family, friends, etc. So I left the company for a short while, but very quickly, within 6 months, I was asked to come back to work for product marketing in M365 on this new and exciting AI product, Project Cortex, which became Syntax and Viva Topics. So I was aware of the MVP program at that point. I didn't know about it for my first 12 years, but when I was in product marketing, because as we were preparing the product for general availability, or products as it became, we worked very closely with the MVP community. And we had MVPs who worked for organizations that were part of several private previews that, work very closely with marketing and with engineering to refine and fine tune and perfect the product before they were released. So I was aware of it. I never thought of it myself that, I should try to become an MVP, but because I'm a communities person at heart, I enjoy helping people. I enjoy sharing my expertise and experience, not necessarily expecting a return for it, and that's why I publish so much on LinkedIn and share so much on LinkedIn, for instance, because I like to contribute to the bigger community. So I started speaking at these different events, like we have in Europe and North America, collab days, for instance. This would used to be SharePoint Saturdays. So I started, speaking at some of these, and I met some of the MVP OGs, as they call them, some of the folks that's been in this. Eric Schupps is one of them, the SharePoint cowboy. You might have heard of him, or your listeners who are into SharePoint probably know who it is, and Sue Hanley and Mark Anderson and all these guys. And that's how the idea came about, because some of them said, we should probably nominate you because we actually need more people that has the business value, business problem focus, and not only deep technical experts, developers, admins, right? So I thought, well, okay, that would be nice, but it was still that's how it came about. I just started attending more of these collab days events and speaking at all these things, and then someone in the UK nominated me after the collab days Bletchley Park last year, and it was approved. I was very excited about that, very excited, because secret between you and I and all of your listeners, I feel like 15 years as an employee, I've never had as much impact and close interactions and conversations with Microsoft engineering than I do as an MVP. And I'm very humbled by that fact. But I also thrive on it. It really motivates me because my personality is just, I like to have an impact. I'm an impact junkie, impact and influence for improvement, making things better is kind of what makes me jump out of bed in the morning.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Application MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If you like the show and want to be a supporter, check out buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 Guy. Thanks again, and see you next time.
Are you ready to accelerate your career in the Microsoft ecosystem? The 90-Day Mentoring Challenge, created by Mark Smith, is your opportunity to create a personalized pathway to success. Join over 1,200 alumni from more than 70 countries who have achieved remarkable results, from promotions to new job opportunities. Take it from Nathan, who said, "Since completing the 90-Day Mentoring Challenge, I've become an MVP in business applications and doubled my income." Or from Parvez, who shares, "I've never felt as inspired or energized about my career as I do now." Sign up at arcor.nz365guy.com. You can find the link in the show notes. And if you use the code podcast, you'll get 10% off.